the son and successor of Prince Sviatoslav, who is known to both Ukrainians and Russians as Vladimir the Great, instituted a number of lasting changes. When he came to the throne in 980, he made the Slavic sky god Perun the focus of his kingdom's worship. But in 987, he decided to accept Greek Orthodoxy after also considering Catholicism, Islam, and Judaism, just as the rulers of the Khazars had done when they decided to become Jews in the 8th century. Vladimir's decision to convert may have had to do with an agreement he reached with the Byzantine Emperor Basil II to help defend him against a revolt by his own generals. This agreement included marrying Basil's sister, which Vladimir could only do as a Christian. His close relations with the empire may have encouraged his decision to recreate his domain as a centralized monarchy, which led later generations to see him as the creator of a Slavic national identity. After returning from Constantinople to Kiev, Vladimir called on the entire population to gather at the Dnieper River for a mass conversion. He destroyed the statue of Perun and built a church in its place. In some of the other cities of the Rus, people were forced to convert, and resistance to Christianity persisted in the north until the 11th century, including several rebellions led by the pagan priests or sorcerers called Volkvi. Pre-Christian beliefs also influenced the tendency to identify specific pagan gods with Christian saints, and to hold church festivals on the same dates as pagan ones. The new church made use of the same texts and prayers that Byzantine missionaries had translated for the Bulgarians and other Slavs, though they had a warmer relationship with Catholic Europe than did the Byzantine Church, which was often at odds with the papacy in Rome. Vladimir's son Yaroslav, known as the Wise, built new cathedrals in Kiev and Novgorod, and he and his sons set up Orthodox monasteries. It was around this time that Ilarion, the chief religious official of Kiev, composed the first Russian Orthodox text, a sermon that explained the theological distinction between biblical law and divine grace. Vladimir also instituted a major reform to the nation's administrative system, under which the rulers of Kiev would delegate control of the large territories beyond the city to their male relatives, who were sent out to rule those territories as the prince's representatives until they might inherit Kiev itself. The rulers of these other Rus cities often distributed the lands they held there in exchange for the loyalty and assistance of their soldiers and administrators, in much the same way as the lords of feudal Europe were doing at the time. The peasants who farmed these lands were obligated to donate their labor to the local prince, though over time they became more independent and could work for pay if they chose. But despite the power of these Kievan princes, their cities also had traditional governing councils, which could dismiss them and replace them with someone else. Whereas the Kievan princes, up to and including Vladimir, had focused on their relations with the Byzantine Empire, his son Yaroslav drew closer to Western Europe by marrying the women of his family to the Holy Roman Emperor in Germany and to the King of France. He also established a military alliance with Sweden, opened diplomatic relations with the kingdoms of Hungary and Poland, and dealt the Pechenegs such a serious defeat that they never attacked Kiev again. In 1044, he ordered, for reasons that are unclear, a Rus fleet to advance on Constantinople, though it was either destroyed by the Byzantine navy, according to our Greek sources, or sunk by a storm, according to our Russian ones. A new peace treaty was signed 3 years later, and Yaroslav's son married the daughter of Emperor Constantine IX. Prince Yaroslav and then his sons established the first Slavic code of laws, the Ruskaya Pravda, or Rus justice. Like the Scandinavian laws of the time, this code imposed fines for crimes of all kinds, including murder, rather than the corporal or capital punishments demanded by Byzantine law. But it also took for granted the system of communal rather than individual property that had been traditional among the Slavic peoples of the region. At the same time, it reflected the realities of 11th century Rus by giving more rights to the feudal lords who held control over its lands than it did to the peasants who worked them. As Byzantine Orthodoxy began to influence Kievan Rus, schools were set up in the cities to read and teach religious texts, and Byzantine styles of art and architecture were adopted, though there is no evidence that ancient Greek works of literature and philosophy, which were an important part of the Byzantine heritage, were making their way into Russian culture at that time. It does seem that the spread of the Cyrillic alphabet encouraged a high level of literacy among the population. Judging by documents from that time written on tree bark, these include personal letters, business documents, and school exercises. The Kievan state began to disintegrate in the 11th and 12th centuries, as fighting broke out among the descendants of Yaroslav. The competition for control was especially fierce because Vladimir the Great had established for his 12 sons the principle that after the death of a prince, the throne of Kiev was to pass not to his son, but to the oldest living member of the dynasty, who, like his brothers and his other male relatives, would already have been governing one of the other cities. This principle had the unfortunate consequence of encouraging close relatives of the prince to murder one another in order to get to the top of the ladder. This system of succession came to an end in 1097, when a council of local princes divided the country's territories among themselves and established their own permanent dynasties. Kievan Rus was also weakened by the declining economic power of the Byzantine Empire, whose control over the trade of the eastern Mediterranean lost ground to Venice and other Italian merchant cities during the Crusades, when they lent the empire the use of their navies in exchange for greater trading rights. As new European shipping routes appeared, which bypassed the empire, the Rus lost their own access to trade in the region. Then, after the death of Prince Mstislav the Great in 1132, the country was split when Novgorod became an independent city-state, which, like Venice, was based on trade, and run by a council chosen from among the city's wealthy merchant families. Though, like other Slavic cities, it also had a veche, a kind of popular assembly. Since it no longer had a Kievan prince, the city itself was now referred to as Lord Novgorod the Great, and the lands that the prince had controlled were placed in the hands of the city's archbishop. In place of the trade relationship it had enjoyed with Kiev, Novgorod established close economic ties with the Northern European commercial organization known as the Hanseatic League, while the western parts of the Kievan state made arrangements with Poland and Hungary. The status of Kiev itself declined during the 12th century, to the point that when the Prince of Suzdal, a city to the northeast near the Volga River, became the Prince of Kiev in 1169, instead of moving there, he simply looted the city and returned to his own capital. Then, in the middle of the 13th century, Kiev and most other Rus cities were destroyed by the Golden Horde, a khanate or chiefdom that had recently broken away from the Mongol Empire and established its own territory in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. The Slavic towns were made subjects and forced to pay tribute, and some of them, like the Republic of Novgorod, escaped destruction only because they immediately surrendered to the invaders. During the 14th century, the region of Kiev became part of the Lithuanian kingdom, which had been founded in the previous century by a group of Baltic tribes, while Moscow, which until then had been a small part of the Suzdal Principality, became an important ally of the Mongols. This enabled it to surpass its rivals and form the Grand Duchy of Moscow, which was able to throw off Mongol rule late in the 15th century and became the capital of a Russian empire that included both Kiev and Novgorod. Though Kievan Rus did not survive the Middle Ages, it was the first organized Slavic state, as well as the first to embrace Christianity and unite its diverse inhabitants under a common rule. It has therefore been claimed as the foundation of both the Russian and Ukrainian national identities, and impressive statues of Vladimir the Great now stand in both Moscow and Kiev. In the next tutorial, we'll move west to Central Europe and look at the creation and development of the nation of Poland.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel for more tutorials. Support me on Patreon so I can keep making content. And as always, feel free to email me, ProfessorDaveExplains@gmail.com.